everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. My name is Vinamrata Singal. I'm a product manager on the Chrome Web Platform team. I work on Lighthouse, speed metrics, and a whole bunch of other performance tooling initiatives at Google.
And I'm Rick Viscomi. I'm a developer programs engineer on the content ecosystem team. And I work on web transparency tools like HTTP Archive and the Chrome User Experience Report.
And today, Rick and I are here to tell you a little bit about how you can use Lighthouse and the Chrome User Experience Report to guide the performance of your web application. But before we get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself so you know who you're talking to. So fun fact about me, when I was growing up, I've actually grown up in 4 different countries: India, Saudi Arabia, New Zealand, and the United States. And what was interesting as I was growing up across these countries was having access to information was really challenging, either because it was restricted for me and my family, or because no one around us had that information. And that really changed when I started learning how to use the web, because it just made it so much easier to have access to that information. So that's why I really care about making sure the web is available for everyone and is a great experience for all. But even as I was learning how to use the web, there were definitely some pain points with that experience. So this is actually a picture of me as a kid in Saudi Arabia on DSL internet, if you remember those days, learning how to use the internet. And it was really, really, really slow. And what's interesting is that this slowness and this performance pain actually hasn't really gone away for a lot of users. And at Google, we've seen that it has real implications for businesses as well. So we actually have been collecting a whole bunch of data to show the impact that performance can have for businesses. You might have seen this study that we did with DoubleClick that shows that for sites that load in less than 5 seconds, they actually experience a bounce rate that is 53% lower compared to sites that load in more than 5 seconds. Additionally, we have data from Kissmetrics that suggests that shoppers who have trouble with site performance, 79% of them just don't come back. Additionally, for every second that there's a delay in page load time, there's a 7% drop in conversion rate. I just want to emphasize that again. For every extra second that your site is slower, you can lose 7% of your users. Now, this is all to say that if you're a business that's online, you should care about performance. And you might say to me, like, Vinamrata, I get it. Like, I should invest in performance, but what do I do about it? What is the guidance? What are the tools? What are the metrics? And to that I say, you've come to the right place. And we hope that to answer these questions and many more. So to give you a little bit of overview, what we'll be talking about today, we're going to start off by giving you a little bit of information into performance metrics, and then kind of walk you through the overall tooling and guidance landscape. Then Rick is going to take over and tell you a little bit about the Chrome User Experience Report, and then I'll wrap us up with Lighthouse. So let's get started with performance metrics. So when we talk about performance metrics, what we're really talking about is collecting data. And there's kind of 2 sources of data you want to collect. The first is lab data, which is also known as metrics from the lab. And when you're collecting lab data, it's essentially performance data that you're collecting in a controlled lab-like environment. And this can be really useful for getting very granular performance information of your site. The second type of data is what we call field data, or metrics from the wild, or you might have also seen this referenced as RUM measurement or real user metrics. And the idea is you're collecting data about how real users are experiencing the performance of your site. And this is really helpful in understanding the ground truth of the performance of your site. Now, you might look at this image and think that, oh, like, am I supposed to use one or the other? But in reality, we recommend that you use both of them together. So the first step is that you use field data to just like understand your users, understand the baseline performance of your site. Where are your users coming from? What devices are they on? What networks are they on? That really helps you understand how to calibrate your lab environments. Once you understand the baseline and whatever business or key performance indicators you're trying to optimize for, then you can set goals around the targets for whatever you want the performance to be. After you understand that, you want to start looking at the lab data, calibrated from what you saw in the field, to really drill down and understand what parts of the performance you need to improve, as well as implement the optimization to make the site faster. Once you've made improvements in the lab, you want to go back to the field to make sure that you're actually seeing the improvements in the lab, in the wild, and then also monitoring the performance of your site for regressions. So now that we've spent a whole bunch of time talking about where this performance data comes from, you might be asking, what data do I collect? And when we think about the performance of a site, what we're really trying to quantify is how does a real user experience the performance of your site? And there's kind of two buckets of those user experience. So the first bucket is what we call visual metrics. So this essentially measures how fast is stuff getting painted on the screen. And then there's the second bucket, which is interactivity metrics. And that's essentially measuring how quickly does your site become usable for your users. And under these buckets, we have specific metrics. In the visual metrics section, we have metrics like first contentful paint and speed index. And then in the interactivity metrics section, we have metrics like time to interactive. And to really understand what those metrics mean, I think it's helpful to visualize them on a timeline. And let's go back to the concept of, ultimately with performance, we're just trying to measure how real users experience this. So on the very far left, you have first contentful paint. So what this means is when the first piece of content starts appearing on your screen, could be text, image, or SVG. And this is a really pivotal moment in the user experience because this is the point where users like, okay, the site is loading, it's like doing something. And then you have at the very end, you have time to interactive. And what time to interactive basically for a user means that everything is loaded, they can interact with any part of your page, and it just is responsive, it works. And then everywhere in the middle, you have what we call speed index, which essentially measures how quickly does the rest of your page load. And speed index tends to reward pages that load a lot of stuff earlier because that to a user feels very, very fast. And we've actually seen a lot of developers have success with this toolkit of metrics. I want to share an anecdote of one of my favorites. So a lot of you might have heard of Pinterest. We actually spent a whole bunch of time with Pinterest helping them upgrade their mobile web experience to a progressive web app. And as a result of this, they also wanted to improve the overall interactivity of their experience. And they actually improved their time to interactive from 26 to 5.6 seconds. And as a result of this, they saw a whole set of improvements across their business metrics. So they saw an overall 40% increase in the number of users who spent more than 5 minutes on their site. They saw a 44% increase in the amount of user-generated ad revenue. They saw a 50% increase in the amount of ad click-through rate, as well as a 60% increase in core engagement. So all in all, this is really awesome work. But what's interesting is I think that we can still do a lot better to help developers understand the interactivity experience. And specifically, I think the place where we can make a lot of impact is right now time to interactive is only a lab metric. I think we can do a better job of helping developers understand interactivity in the wild. How are users first starting to actually understand the interactivity or experience, especially when they come to your app for the first time? I think in order to make this a little bit more concrete, I want to tell you a story. So imagine for a second that you're not a developer, you put your developer hat down and you're a user. So pretend that you just heard about this new site. Let's say it's like vinamratacoolstore.com, and you decide to go on it on your phone. And it's like loading, and so you decide to start interacting with it, and you click on a button, but nothing happens. So you keep clicking on this button, but nothing is happening. Raise your hand if you've ever had that happen to you. Yeah, it's like everyone. Keep your hands up. And keep your hands up if you were really frustrated by that experience. Or you felt any frustration. Okay. It's like everyone for those on the live stream. So again, it's a really frustrating experience. So putting our user hat down again and then putting our developer hat back on, we can probably understand why something like this would happen. So one explanation for this is, the browser is done rendering all the HTML and CSS, but because you have so much JavaScript, the browser is taking all this time to compile, parse, and execute all the JavaScript. So when this new user input action comes through, the browser doesn't have time to respond to it because it's blocked by all the JavaScript that your website has. And this is exactly the type of user experience we want to minimize with a metric called first input delay, which we're introducing for the first time today. So first input delay is essentially measuring the latency of the user's first interaction with the page. And what this basically means is from the time that a user interacts with your page, the time that when that happens, to the time when the code that you wrote to respond to that interaction actually runs. And we think really focusing on the first user experience is really critical because as you saw a couple slides ago, a lot of users leave if the first experience is terrible. And if you want to optimize business metrics like bounce rate and conversion rate, then you need to make sure that your first experience is really, really solid. We're still working on the definition of this metric as well as our messaging. So we really encourage you to give us feedback. Here's a link to some docs and a JavaScript polyfill that you can start using to measure first input delay on your website. So check it out, and please give us feedback by filing an issue on the polyfill repo. So now that we've spent a whole bunch of time talking about metrics, let's transition to talking about the overall tooling and guidance. So this is kind of an overview of all the tools that we have published as Google about site performance. And one of the most common questions we get is, like, Google, like, you've put all these tools out, but, like, how do I navigate this? How do I use this? What tool should I be using? Great question. And ironically, we built a tool to help you understand this. But not ironically, it's pretty awesome. So this is what we call the Speed Tools Overview. It's essentially an infographic that helps you understand for which use case, whether it could be, I just want to build a business case for performance so my company invests in it, to, like, I actually want to get really nitty-gritty into performance. And all the use cases in between helps you understand what tool you should be using. So I really encourage you to check it out and give us feedback about things that you think are missing. And we're really looking forward to hearing more from you. So now that we've covered a little bit about tooling and metrics, we thought it would be really helpful to deep dive into two tools in particular. So I'm going to hand it off to Rick now, who's going to tell you a little bit about the Chrome User Experience Report.
Thank you. So when we talk about metrics from the field, most people think of traditional real user measurement, or RUM, where you measure things like performance, page load, page views, and conversion. This is great for understanding the user experience on your own site, but how do we understand the user experience on the web as a whole? How do we know if the web is getting faster or more usable? How do we know if our site's performance is considered normal? For that, we need a different set of metrics from the field that represent the web at large. The Chrome UX report, also known as CRUX, helps us understand the state of the web. Specifically, it's a public collection of web performance data from real Chrome users. Let's see how it works. So when you have a data set that covers the web at large, it enables analyses that were never before possible. For example, you can compare real user performance across particular sites. And you could see how you stack up against competitors. In this example, we can see that competitor B is slightly faster than my website. This is a really good motivator for me to care about web performance. Because it's one thing to know how fast my site is, but it's another to see just how much faster or slower it is compared to the competition. Additionally, the Chrome UX report is updated monthly, so you can track your performance benchmarks over time. As I optimize the performance of my site, I can actually see those gains in each iteration of the report. Or alternatively, I could see that my competitor is investing in performance, and I really need to catch up. So what exactly does the Chrome UX report measure? It includes some of the visual metrics Vinamrata mentioned earlier, like first and first contentful paint. It also includes traditional page load metrics, like DOM content loaded and onload. When I'm exploring this data set, my go-to metric is always first contentful paint. Of the four metrics, it most closely reflects the real user experience of feeling like the page is loading. It also includes useful dimensions for slicing the data, like the form factor of the user's device, desktop, phone, tablet, and the effective connection type in mobile terms, 4G, 3G, 2G, and even offline. This reports the effective speed, not the advertised network. For example, a user on slow Wi-Fi would be considered 2G. Another dimension that early users requested was the ability to slice by country. With it, you can see how the user experience varies by geography. For example, it can help you understand how much slower the user experience is in places farther away from your web servers. There are two ways the data is aggregated, by URL and by origin. So how does the origin differ from a URL? It starts with the protocol, either it's secure or not secure. The subdomain, for example, www, mail, or no subdomain at all. And of course, the domain, like google.com or example.com, which itself includes suffixes like .com, .co.uk, .edu. What an origin doesn't include is the path after the domain. Index.html, product/123. Performance from all of those paths are aggregated at the origin level. There are approximately 4 million of these origins in the dataset. This has grown 400x since it was first announced at the Chrome Dev Summit in October, and it's still growing each month. Now, it's worth mentioning that there are way more than 4 million origins on the web, so your website may or may not be included depending on its popularity. Okay, you're probably wondering, how do you start using it? The raw data is available on Google BigQuery, which is a data warehouse with SQL-like syntax. You can write queries to get insights about specific origins or the web as a whole. In this query, we're calculating the monthly density or proportion of user experiences in which the first contentful paint is less than 1 second. It's broken down by 2 hypothetical competitors, developers and chrome.google.com. The raw results are definitely informative, but it's kind of hard to understand just by looking at it. What we're trying to understand is, which origin is faster and how are they trending? To help answer that, let's visualize the data. We can integrate with 2 Google tools, Sheets and Data Studio. You'll notice on the BigQuery results page, there's a button to export to Sheets. That will automatically create a new sheet and populate it with a table of data. From there, it's easy to create a simple chart to visualize the performance data. It's clear from this chart that developers.google.com has a higher density of first contentful paint experiences less than 1 second. Also notice that the performance fluctuates month to month. Why would that be? It's not just that the sites themselves are getting faster or slower. It could be user population changes as well. For example, the population of users on faster or slower connections could be fluctuating. You can also integrate it with Google Data Studio. With it, you can build fully customizable and interactive dashboards and get live updates from the raw data on BigQuery. So for example, this dashboard is showing one way you could monitor the distribution of performance metrics over time. But what if you don't want to work to get this data and you just want high-level results now? There are a few Google tools built on the Chrome UX report to help you get insights quickly. The first is PageSpeed Insights, which was recently updated to include this real user performance data, alongside its popular performance optimization recommendations. PageSpeed Insights is built on the URL aggregated report data. This is more targeted performance data than you can get on BigQuery. And here we're looking at the homepage for Google I/O. PageSpeed Insights also surfaces the median first contentful paint and DOM content loaded metrics, as well as an indicator to convey how fast or slow it is in relation to the rest of the web. And it turns out that the I/O web page is actually considered slow. PageSpeed Insights also shows the distribution, so you can get a sense for how skewed user experiences really are. In this case, we see that most first contentful paints are fast, but 82% of DOM content loaded experiences are considered slow. Another Google tool built on the Chrome UX report is the Speed Scorecard. This tool allows you to enter multiple websites and stack rank their performance. It also enables you to target specific geographic regions and connection speeds to see how performance varies. It also has something I really love, a way to correlate performance metrics with business metrics like revenue. It estimates how much more revenue could be earned if nothing else changed but site performance. You just use the slider to simulate performance improvements and its predicted effect on revenue. Again, this is another really great motivator to invest in performance, and not just for developers, but especially business leaders who think in dollars. Last, I wanted to share a case study of how the Chrome UX report is being used outside of Google. mPulse is a real user measurement product from Akamai, a leading CDN provider. Akamai is able to use the Chrome UX report to convince potential mPulse customers to care about real user measurement. For example, some companies don't have any RUM tools at all, and they may be relying on lab testing like web page test, which only gives them a narrow view of their performance. Akamai can show these companies their real user performance in the Chrome UX report, which may be vastly different from their performance in the lab. Just imagine the surprise to learn that users experience your site many times slower than your lab tests indicate. Akamai is also looking to integrate this data with their mPulse product. Recall that with metrics from the web as a whole, it's possible to see performance of competitors. In mPulse, for the first time, a customer could see competitors' real user performance data alongside their own. And by leveraging form factor, connection, and geography dimensions, site owners are now able to better understand how they stack up in specific markets. The charts shown here indicate how differently competing sites perform, especially on mobile. And this is exactly the kind of thing that makes the Chrome UX report so powerful, understanding how your site's performance fits into the larger picture of performance on the web as a whole. So this is just a small taste of the power of the Chrome UX report dataset, and it's only getting better over time. There are new datasets being released every month. In fact, we just had the April dataset released this week. We're also looking to add more user-centric performance metrics, like first input delay mentioned earlier. And we're working with other partners to get this data integrated into more third-party tools. So now I'm going to hand it back to Vinamrata to tell you about Lighthouse.
Thank you, Rick. You guys can clap. Awesome. So more audience participation here. Can you all raise your hands if you've ever used Lighthouse before? Oh, awesome, yay. So for those of you who haven't, Lighthouse is a developer tool that you can run today on your website. And it basically gives you personalized advice about what you're doing well and what you can do better across 5 different categories: performance, progressive web app or PWAs, accessibility, best practices, and search engine optimization or SEO. Today, you can run Lighthouse through 4 different ways. You can run it as a standalone Lighthouse Chrome extension. You can run it on the audits panel in Chrome Developer Tools. You can run it as an NPM module, and this is the NPM command to install it if you choose to. And you can run it on web page test. Now, I want to take a step back and tell you a little bit about the journey that we've kind of taken on the product side to give you a little bit of context of where we're going. So this is a screenshot of Paul Irish, who's the tech lead on Lighthouse, announcing the project at Chrome Developer Summit. And our goal with Lighthouse was we understand that there's a lot of advice kind of thrown at developers like every day about like new things that you should be doing to create really good web experiences. And we really wanted it to be like the one-stop shop that you have to go to get all the advice in one place. And we've been hard at work at making this tool as comprehensive as possible. So we've actually launched over 100 audits into the report, including a whole new section focused on search engine optimization this year. And we've seen a lot of really great adoptions in the community. Specifically, in 2018 alone, we've seen over 500,000 users running over 2 million plus audits, which is great. And we hear stories from developers all the time about all the success they're having with Lighthouse. So I want to share with you one of my favorites. So this is Milan. Milan is a fashion e-commerce retailer based out of China. And they actually used Lighthouse when they were making performance improvements to their site as well as building a progressive web app. And they actually improved their Lighthouse PWA score by 57 points to 100. And they improved their Lighthouse performance score by 35 points to 75. And as a result of just making these 2 improvements, they were able to see a 10% increase in their mobile conversion rates, as well as a 65% decrease in their ad bounce rate. So pretty awesome stuff, but we also know that on the Lighthouse team, there's still a lot we can do to make the product even better for y'all to use. So let's just summarize this as like our top user requests. So the first user request we get, especially from people who are looking at the Lighthouse report for the first time, is, hey, like, can you make this report easier to understand because it's like kind of cluttered and kind of confusing? So that's one request we get. The other request we get is, I run Lighthouse, but the performance metrics and scores change from run to run, even if I'm running it the same way. Can you make Lighthouse more stable? And then the third is, I love Lighthouse, it's awesome, but I don't want to just run it on one site. I want to be able to run it on hundreds and thousands of sites. Can I conduct a bulk analysis using Lighthouse? And today, I'm going to walk you through how you can do all 3 of those things with new stuff that we've been working on. So let's get started with the first one, about how to make the report easier to understand. So we take this concern pretty seriously, and we actually did an entire usability study in the earlier part of this year. And taking results from that study, we actually came up with this whole new UI, which you can see today. You can also see this UI in the mobile web sandbox if you try using Lighthouse there. But my personal favorite new feature of this UI, which unfortunately you can't see from the screenshot, is when you hover over all the metrics, there's like a little tooltip that comes up, and it gives you more information about the metrics. So if you've never heard of like first CPU idle, you can kind of get a better understanding of what it is. And this new UI is actually launching with 3.0, which we're planning on releasing this week. You can get 3.0 today through NPM, doing Lighthouse at Next. It'll be the default way to run Lighthouse on the Chrome extension, which we'll be releasing later this week. And it will be coming to DevTools in Chrome 68. If you want more information about everything else that's coming in 3.0, you can check out that doc over there. I'll be walking through some more updates, but that doc has all the information. So let's move on to talking about the second concern that folks often have with Lighthouse, which is around the performance score. So these are actually scores that I got for a website that I will not name for their performance score of their site. And this was just consecutive runs one after the other. And again, this is a problem that we've actually known for a very long time. And we had a concerted effort since last year to work on it that we're calling Project Lantern. In my opinion, it has the best logo out of all the logos that we've ever created. So to understand what Lantern does that's different, I want to tell you a little bit about how Lighthouse computes performance metrics today. So when Lighthouse is computing the performance metrics of your site, what it's doing is it's actually throttling your page, trying to emulate it as if it was a user on a mobile device on a 3G network, and then computing the performance metrics accordingly. What Lantern does is basically completely rechanges the way we do this. Instead, it tries to estimate based on inputs you give it about what network and what device the user is on to compute the performance metrics itself. And using this approach, we've actually been able to see a 50% reduction in the amount of variability in the Lighthouse performance score while maintaining accuracy with what you get with traditional DevTools throttling. In addition, as a side bonus, you also reduce the amount of time it takes to run and warm up Lighthouse by 50%, which I know it can be annoying for a lot of people. So one question you might be asking is how does Lantern do this stuff? And I'm going to give you a very high, broad level walkthrough of how Lantern does what it does. So the first thing that Lantern does is it basically gets a static list of all the assets that are necessary in order to render your page. And in this extremely contrived example, in this case, it's like the index.html along with the blocking.css and JavaScript. And once it kind of knows, these are the assets, this is how much the assets weigh, then it takes into account the RTT, the time it would take to transport one packet and in this case, it's 150 milliseconds. And this number is kind of estimated based on two variables on the right, in which case it's the network throughput as well as the CPU throttling. And then using the RTT as well as knowing the size of all the assets that are required to be transferred in order to render your site, Lantern can then predict all the different performance metrics. And on the bottom, you can see all the different things that need to occur in order to open the network connection are also taken into account. And that's kind of gives you a very high level of how Lantern works. So Lantern is going to be the default performance engine for Lighthouse, starting with 3.0. And so if you want to get started on understanding Lantern as well as using it, you can just get 3.0 the way that I showed you earlier. So now I want to move on to talking about scale, specifically scaling Lighthouse. And today I'm happy to announce that we've been working on an API. This is the Lighthouse API. It's a RESTful API that allows you to get Lighthouse results for any URL. And I am really excited because I think it unlocks a couple of really important use cases that people have been talking to us about. The first is it allows you to build dashboards. You can track not just your home page or landing page, but you can track all of the different site pages that you might have. Second is, you can build tools on top of Lighthouse, as well as integrate Lighthouse into whatever continuous integration test suite that you might have. And then finally, you can conduct large-scale data analysis using Lighthouse itself. This is an overview of what the API currently looks like. And for those of you who use Lighthouse on the command line, you can see it's pretty similar to what the command line would give you, except we've made it a little bit more ergonomic for people to use. So the current status of the API is that it's in private beta. We've currently been working with a couple partners in order to iterate on the definition. If you're interested or intrigued by this API, I'll have more information later on in the talk about how you can get whitelisted for access. But we're planning on launching it as a free public Google service very, very soon. So I want to take a little bit of time to tell you why I'm personally really excited about the API. One of the things that I was mentioning earlier was, we have all these tools, and we're trying to align our tooling story together. But one of the problems that we've had in that is we don't really have a common infrastructure that all the tools can kind of rely upon in order to align the tools. And I really think that Lighthouse API gets us one step closer, because it kind of creates a pipeline that a bunch of other tools can use in order to align all the tools together. And so I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot more tooling alignment initiatives in the future. So now you might be wondering, as an external developer, like, what can Lighthouse do for me? So I want to tell you a little bit about what two of our partners did with the Lighthouse API. So the first one is Mobify's logo you can see over there. Mobify is a platform for retailers to build customer-first shopping experiences through progressive web apps and accelerated mobile pages. Some of their customers include Lancome, Lilly Pulitzer, and Car Parts. And as part of this platform, they have this product called the Analytics Dashboard, which essentially makes it easier for business leaders at these retailers to monitor performance and customer engagement. So in order to make this process easier, monitoring performance and customer engagement, they actually integrated the API into their dashboard. And this is what it looks like. So this really helps business leaders kind of get a better understanding of how the performance metrics that Lighthouse is reporting can be correlated to business metrics they might care about. In this case, this is actually a live example of how one of Mobify's clients, Debenhams, which is a leading British retailer, actually uses the data provided by the API to be able to correlate the scores with bounce rate, which is a metric that they care about. And I'm really excited for this use case because I think this really helps business leaders understand the return of investment that they're getting for putting work into performance, and just makes it that much more obvious. So the second partner that I want to talk about is Duda, which is a website builder for web professionals and agencies. There are currently over 12 million sites that are built using Duda. And Duda really wants to make sure that whatever sites are being built, that they're fast, and especially as they add new functionality to the platform. And so they're actually using Lighthouse to add progressive web app functionality to the platform. But now with the API, this process becomes really easy because they're just able to integrate Lighthouse into their continuous integration pipeline. So Duda uses Jenkins, as you can see, to do their continuous integration tests. And as you can see over here, they've just added Lighthouse as one of the components. And they're able to set thresholds for their developers so that, if it doesn't meet the threshold, they fail the build. In this case, the build has failed, and they're able to kind of dig into the report to understand what audits are passing, what audits are failing. And again, I think this unlocks a use case that we've heard from a lot of developers with Lighthouse, which is once you do all the work and the time investment to make your site fast, to make it a PWA, then how do you keep it that way? And I think the API makes it really easy because you can just integrate it into whatever continuous integration system you have. And Duda actually plans that once the API is publicly launched, to release this plugin to the entire Jenkins community, so that if you use Jenkins, it's that much easier to get started with Lighthouse. I really want to thank both Duda and Mobify for all the work they did in pulling these demos together. They're super awesome, and I'm even so much more excited to see what you do with this API. So if you were intrigued by any of the demos that we just shared, and you want to get early access to the API, you can sign up on this interest form over here, and a member of our team will be in touch with you very, very shortly. So I'm going to wrap up the talk. Rick and I talked about a lot of stuff, and I want to wrap it up with some key takeaways, of which there's only one. So the main takeaway that I hope that you get is that there's two kinds of performance data that we care about. There's lab data and field data. And lab data is essentially data that you collect in a controlled lab-like environment. Really helpful for drilling down into specific performance information and getting really granular and nitty-gritty. Field data is really useful if you want to understand the source of truth about the performance of your site, because it's essentially data you collect in order to understand how real users are experiencing the performance of your site. Lighthouse is a tool that can give you lab data, and the Chrome User Experience Report that Rick talked about is a tool that can give you field data. Now, a talk by a product manager wouldn't be complete without any action items for you all to take. So I'm going to list 4 of them out. So this is a really good time to take out your phones and take pictures, because I'm going to kind of go through this quickly. So the first action item we have is about first input delay, which is our main interactivity metric in the wild. So if you're interested or intrigued about improving how real users are dealing with the interactivity of your website, I encourage you to check first input delay. Here's a link to the docs. Here's a link to the polyfill. Please give us feedback. The second is around the Speed Tools Overview. This is a tool that can really help you understand what tool you should be using when thinking about the performance of your site. Finally, we have the Chrome User Experience Report that Rick talked about. If you want to understand how to baseline your performance statistics, do competitor analysis, and all these other really cool use cases, check out Chrome User Experience Report. Really cool tool. always making it better. And then finally, we have Lighthouse. Lighthouse you can run on your browser if you use Chrome. And you can also look into using the Lighthouse API if you're interested in using Lighthouse at scale. Here's the early interest form. And that's it. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I know it's like 5 p.m. on a Wednesday, so really appreciate all your time. So we are going to stick around for a little bit if you have additional questions, but you can also find us at Sandbox G. We'll be there for most of tomorrow, so come say hi. But I'm Vinamrata, and have a great rest of your I.O. Thank you so much.
Thank you.